for the show too. This is new. Also, I gotta screw my camera. You guys know it's not in the picture if we don't change this up.
Is the beautiful duster? Yeah, I don't know how I'm loving this.
Yeah,
Also, are we gonna get the countdown, Martin, or is it just gonna
the
go right
countdown
into
already
the
went.
audio?
The countdown already happened. We are live.
There we go.
20 seconds live.
The actual co-host is back up.
Oh, I know we're actually live. I'm just expecting to get the black countdown.
You gonna play the goddamn song at any?
Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs at the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I am your host, Dallas Hammer, joined today by brave, bold Brian Marceau.
Oh yeah, Dallas. Good to be here to talk. This historic Thursday is when everything tips off for us, man. But a historic week for Vandal basketball following a different historic week. So nowhere else I'd rather be, dude.
And last but not least, the man in Moscow himself, producer redacted, our brick wall, Marten Heemstra. Martin, how's it going, man?
It's going good. It's just like Brian said, it's another fun week. I'm excited to talk. Still be talking Vandal basketball for another week right now.
Yeah, I feel like this is the longest our show has ever covered basketball because, again, guys, if you are living under a rock and somehow learning this news from us, both the Idaho men and women's basketball teams won Starch Madness down in Boise the other week and have advanced to the NCAA tournament. If you weren't paying attention on Selection Sunday, both the men and women are headed to Oklahoma as the women will be playing Oklahoma themselves in Norman, Oklahoma, while the Vandal men will be in Oklahoma City. The men play Thursday night at 7:10 Pacific, while the women play Friday night at 7 Pacific. Again, just a half-hour jaunt between the two locations. So anybody trying to travel to see the Vandals in action in the NCAA tournament, you've got one location, two different arenas technically, one location, 2 arenas, 2 teams. Worked out really well for all of those Vandals that are going to try to travel to this. But guys, I am filibustering us long enough. This is Around the Bar, brought to us by Hughes River Expeditions. Let's start with the women first, as they have carried our show throughout this season. Again, all respect to the men's program and the incredible run they had in Starch Madness. But, up until that miraculous run, we were all talking, hey, it's the women are carrying basketball this season. So let's tear it off. Our Big Sky champion, Idaho Vandals, the number 14 seed, headed to Oklahoma to face off against the number 3 seed Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun game this Friday night. As Dallas said, they are playing Oklahoma out of the SEC. I'm still gonna say the Big 12 because they should not be there. Some of the kind of just of note of things to kind of just of note for Oklahoma, for those that don't know about them, they are 24-7 overall. 24-7 overall, 11-5 in conference. Did not win their conference sign a game. Who doesn't do that? Of note, kind of the big player that people literally probably the best player on their team right now is Reagan Beers out of Littleton, Colorado. Previously played at Oregon State. For those that might remember her from her time there, she's probably the most prominent player on the team right there for Idaho. A lot of their players are some kind of just spitballing right now on the roster. It's a big team, like physically, with like height wise for Idaho. They are going to be, yeah. Brian, I'm just going to let you join in now because I'm stumbling over my feet right now.
That's okay. So hey, we all know we can hold 2 things in our head at once, right? Talking about Big Sky basketball in the NCAA tournament. One, it is a huge deal for your school to get to the NCAA tournament out of one big league. In a way, both Idaho's men's and women's teams, they've already won their Super Bowl by getting to the NCAA tournament. And I bring that up because just contextually, a men's team has not won in the Big Sky since 2006. University of Montana beat Nevada. A women's team has not won since
the national tournament?
Yeah. So yeah, in the national
tournament.
Yeah. A Big Sky men's team has not won a game in the NCAA tournament since 2006 when Montana beat Nevada, a mid-major story at the time. It's worse in women. The last team was Montana, but it was 1994. So there is, and in the NIL world we live in, where the haves have an ocean of money to spend, and I'm saying the haves are probably like 20 to 25-ish teams. Idaho is one of the teams in the NCAA tournament, women I'm talking now, but this works for both sides of the bracket, with the smallest NIL budget. So we just know, like, hey, we can all hold this in our head at the same time, right? This is awesome for Idaho. We know we're going to be rooting, but this is a gigantic hill to climb for both teams, and we need to not be devastated and upset at the teams if they don't climb this hurdle, because it hasn't happened in 30 years and change on the women's side, 20 years this year on the men's side. So part of why Marten was stumbling a little bit is because there's a lot that Idaho is going to have to match up with. Now, Oklahoma, they've had actually a quite similar season to Idaho, except against Big 12 instead of against Big Sky. Both teams, Idaho and Oklahoma, can absolutely score the ball. Oklahoma's averaging 86 points per game. Oklahoma also, similar to Idaho, they out-rebound teams pretty dang bad. Oklahoma out-rebounded teams on the season by 11.9, essentially 12. Idaho, a team that we knew great on the boards, right, in the Big Sky, well, they out-rebounded teams by 11.5 on the season. And, what Marten talked about with this Oklahoma team with 7 losses, there's not a single ranked loss during Oklahoma's season this year. So this is a team that's very tough. I really, in my head, I am holding this comparison as both of these teams have had virtually identical seasons, except it's the step that we're looking at is Big 12 basketball. The type of teams that typically, the high end of the Big 12 are the type of teams that are regularly advancing in the NCAA tournament, versus, Idaho dominates the Big Sky. And it was a big story during the women's season that Montana State may have a case for a bid, at-large bid, even if they lost during the conference tournament. By the way, Montana State ended up getting an NIT berth, but not an NCAA berth. So no, this is a huge hurdle to climb. And one of the things that I guess that, two edges I'm looking at here for Oklahoma, because that is who we're looking at. And this is in Norman, because for the women's tournament, the top seed of a region hosts the first two round of games. So this is not a neutral court for Idaho. It's kind of cool that both teams are in Oklahoma. So some people who travel, let's say, to see the men play on Thursday in Oklahoma City, if they stay, they can travel to Norman and see the women's team play on Friday. Really cool. Like, in one sense, an awesome setup to have that happen. In the other sense, it sucks because it means, well, who Idaho playing? They're playing University of Oklahoma, a very, very good basketball team who also, look, they've got 5 players averaging double figures right now. Marten already hit on Reagan Beers as one of the top players. She averages double-double on the season at the center position. But guard Aaliyah Chavez is averaging 18, just under 18.5 points a game, shooting 37.8% from the field, 31-ish% from deep. Just as a reference point, the 3-point field goal percentage generally is a little bit lower on the women's side compared to men in what you would say is an average level shooter. So they've got they have inside scoring, they've got outside scoring, but even outside of those two players, you still have 3 other players averaging 10.5 points per game or more. So we'll get to keys to the game in a second, Dallas. But like, just when I see this, on the one hand, this is probably the best Idaho women's team we've ever seen. As far as overall depth of talent, maybe not the single best individual player if you talk about different seasons, but from player number 1 to player number 8, this is a very deep team riding a 19-game winning streak heading into the Big Sky Conference tournament. NCAA tournament. This is the type of team that Oklahoma in their game prep probably doesn't think they can take lightly, in spite of all the advantages that Oklahoma as a program is going to have. But as Marten, before I look at my key, or Dallas, before I talk about my keys that I'm paying attention for on the Idaho side, if we're going to get an upset, and we all know this, if either Idaho team wins, it will be thought of as a monumental upset. That is not a put down to the players who are very good. Coach Morera talked about Idaho probably being one of the most, if not the most dangerous 13 seed in the women's bracket. I completely co-sign that. But simultaneously, Oklahoma is not a bullshit seed at number 4.
No, not at all. This is the distance between the haves and the have-nots in women's basketball is certainly more egregious than it is in men's. And the difference here between the women playing a 3 seed compared to even a 4 seed would be pretty monstrous. Oklahoma finished the season 10th overall in the women's poll. Brian, you mentioned they scored 86 points a game. That's 3rd in the nation. So this is a very high scoring team that does not shoot the 3 particularly well. Shot 29% behind the arc. So this is not a team that's going to live and die by the 3. This is just a very well-rounded team. You look at their losses. You mentioned the pretty good resume there. Going off of the final poll, they lost to number 2 UCLA. They lost to number 3 Texas. They lost to number 5 LSU twice. They lost to number 6 Vanderbilt, number 16 Kentucky, and number 19 Ole Miss. Those are the losses for the Oklahoma Sooners.
I do want to jump in quick to also add, they beat the number 2 or number 3 overall seed. I'm going to go off of what they are. South Carolina and Don Staley's team, who I believe also, who I think I can't remember who won last, if they won that natty yet, but they are probably the best team in the SEC overall. That's no small feat. They beat probably what our equivalent is to Montana State.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Marten, to point that out. That's the South Carolina program has been outstanding for quite a long time. They lost to Texas twice this year, and then their only other loss was again to Oklahoma. No, Don Staley's teams have been very good for a very long time, and
they're a 1 seed this year.
Yeah, they're a 1 seed this year. They've They've won 2 titles in the last 5, maybe 6 years. I forget if it's 5 or 6 there, but a perennial powerhouse program. That's what Oklahoma is continuing to to battle game in and game out. So they're the one thing I wanted to hit is defensively, this team is very, very good. They hold their opponents to shooting 35.9%. It's 15th in the country. So while we all obviously very much believe in Coach Moreira and this Idaho team that legitimately could go down as the best team in school history, they have got their work cut out for them here, guys.
To me, it'll have to be a near perfect game for me to see them. Like, I think I'm going to be, as people know me, as Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows at this team. Like, it's going to have to be a near perfect game, but it's going to be, just enjoy the fucking shit out of the season in this team. And it's going to be fun to watch this team on national TV this Friday on ESPN, I believe.
Yeah, I'm going to view this, just my reference point here is going to be not what Oklahoma needs to do at all, because Oklahoma, there are many incarnations of this game where Oklahoma could win by a lot or win by a little. So I'm going to focus on, hey, if Idaho's going to keep it tight and if Idaho's going to win, what are some things that are going to have to happen? And first, Idaho's going to have to rebound. They've rebounded great this entire season, but so is Oklahoma against a different level of competition. Now, there's reason to believe
Oklahoma is 4th in the country in total rebounds.
Yeah, I'm just going over margin right now. Oklahoma out rebounds teams by just under 12. Idaho 11.5 on the season. So look, that's something Idaho's done great this year, but they're gonna have to have their best rebounding game of the entire season. Idaho absolutely cannot give up second shots to Oklahoma, and they're gonna have to find a way to get some second shots on their own as well. Second, related to rebounding, but also to scoring. We need all 40 post minutes coming from Barbosa and Dos Santos. Barbosa in particular is the one who she's more likely to have had, foul trouble issues keeping her off the floor. Dos Santos sort of has a minute restriction. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if maybe this is the kind of time where this is Dos Santos' theoretical last game. I am curious whether Coach Moreira even is going to care in the same sense. Now, of course, that doesn't mean she's going to go play 40 minutes, because the person who has not been playing that long the entire season, there's no reason to believe she's ready for that right away. But is it feasible that maybe we'd see her play for closer to 30-ish minutes or 32, something like that? I'd expect that's on the table, and that the game flow itself is going to dictate this. But there's just no way that Idaho can get away without having one of those two on the floor at all times. Third, Idaho's going to have to shoot well. Idaho is absolutely going to have to shoot well. There's no way around it. When Idaho, in some of the games where Idaho has struggled, not a put down to all conference talents, Hope Hassman or Kira Gardner, not put down at all. But we're going to need probably the best offensive game of the season out of both those two guards. If Kira can help Idaho by reining it in from deep, if Hope Hassman can put the ball on the floor, penetrate, get some foul trouble out of the post for Oklahoma, force Oklahoma to have at least a little bit of their bench depth be what has to carry the game for them. That's how Idaho can stay in this game in my mind. And then fourth, we did see this in a rotating fashion throughout the Big Sky Conference Tournament and all season. We know that Idaho is going to have to get contribution from Dos Santos. They're down low. She's going to have to make those bunnies, and she's going to be coming up against size that she did not come up against as much in the Big Sky. But Dos Santos has been an all conference level player in multiple conferences. She absolutely is probably the most talented Idaho post outside of Bounce Bay that Idaho's had in ever since I paid attention. But look, she's going to have to make those shots inside. We're going to have to shoot well from deep. Someone outside of those top three scorers I just talked about of Dos Santos, Gardner, and Hassman, one or two other people are going to have to show up. That might be Anna Pinheiro. That might be Anna B. That might be Elena Uriardi. But Idaho is not going to be able to rely on just their top three scorers to kind of carry the day. And I wouldn't be shocked if Oklahoma defensively does pretty much whatever they can to make sure, one, they're going to try to force turnovers, but second, if someone's going to have an open shot, it's probably not going to be one of the all-conference players. We'll throw back to Marten in a second, but just for viewers can already see this, listeners cannot. We are joined by our man on the ground who will help us covering the men's team in a second. That's Madison McCord. He's a reporter for the Spokesman Review, hanging out, and you're in Oklahoma City right now, right, Madison?
I am, yep.
Okay, so you jumped in. We were talking about keys to the game on the women's side. So I don't know how closely you've tracked the women's team, but we're going to throw it to Marten for his keys, and then Madison, you'll have a chance to jump into.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm gonna go Kira Gardner. I know Coach has said this all year. I think if there's a game Kira can lock the fuck in and go, because when Kira's on, she is on. She's gonna be my keys to the game. If Kira can keep things, if she can probably have the game of her life, I think this is a game where I think Idaho has a real shot here. But that's kind of my key to the game, just Kira on offense and Anapi on defense, just having the lockdown game for potentially becoming prime Gary Payton on the court.
I mean, I just to put the cherry on top of that, I agree. I think every guard for Idaho has to shoot above 50% from beyond the arc to even have a wing and a prayer to keep this game close beyond the second half, or excuse me, beyond halftime into the second half.
There's no way Pinheiro is not the one who's going to match up on Chavez. There's just no way.
Yeah.
But Madison,
I'll add to that. When you get to these women's, double-digit seeds versus high seed games, it's so much more unlikely that the upsets happen compared to the men's games. You see them historically. It's such a boat race typically. Idaho's in it. They wouldn't come down to Norman if they weren't going to play the game right. So they got to get the shots to fall. They need to get Reagan Beers in foul trouble, which she did up at Oregon State a little bit. If they can find a way to do that between the two forwards, that'd be great. But realistically, I mean, shots have to fall. We've covered enough of these women's NCAA tournament games, which is a fun thing to say, right? We've covered a few of them now. I was at UConn for the first one, and you got to think, man, it's got to happen. That first one at UConn, I remember there was a freshman for the Huskies that was there, and it was Brianna Stewart, and she wasn't playing in that game. And so we all thought, oh, man, Gino Ariema, what's he going to do? He's missing a star freshman. Well, it turns out they didn't care. They boat raced Idaho on that one. So you just got to play a perfect game in these kind of situations.
No, this is going to go completely off the rails, but that's kind of what I'm known for around here. Madison, correct me if I'm wrong. You were the campus play-by-play guy for that run. Is that correct?
I was. Yeah. That year, it was a super fun year. They were the third seed going to Vegas in the WAC tournament. Upset Utah State, Seattle U in the final. Just a super fun run, and then ran into an absolute brick wall known as the UConn Huskies over in Storrs, Connecticut. And, but the rest is history. Since then, they made the tournament the next year, I believe, or the year after against Louisville. Now we're back in it here against Oklahoma. So it's a pretty fun little run they've put together through several iterations of coaches, which is cool to see for the program.
Yeah, 4 trips in 10 years across 3 coaches. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, any final thoughts on the women's game before we take a trip down the river over to Oklahoma City?
I got nothing.
Only thing I'm going to add is if you're a person who doesn't usually have a cable provider right now, just one, get this figured out beforehand, guys. But 2, you can always get like the Sling TV, like day pass or 3-day pass. Day pass like $5. The weekend pass is like 3-day pass is $10. So just don't let the fact that you may have to spend like $2 or something like that on cables stop you from seeing this, guys. For Big Sky schools, if you make it this far, you already won your Super Bowl. So just do whatever you can to support teams.
I mean, you can just go to the Corner Club too, right? Worse things.
Hey, look at that. That's
worse things. You could be in Oklahoma City, so might as well go to the Corner Club.
You know what you could also do, guys? You could take a great all-inclusive week-long vacation right in your backyard. Hughes River Expedition has been on the vacation of a lifetime. Main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway. And you could check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, Brian, always beaches, especially those beaches in Oklahoma, man. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and like I'm always saying, fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire United States. Just bring your clothes, and HRE is going to handle everything else. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. Guys, that gets to Kelvin Sampson hour, which, kind of oddly, weirdly, interestingly enough, he's got a little bit of familiarity with the Idaho Vandals and has lost to the Idaho Vandals before. And that's as far as my analysis is going to take us. So, Brian, I'm going to give you the wheel and then kind of let you just guide this conversation how you may like.
Okay, as tough as the matchup the women have is, the men's matchup to me is a little tougher. University of Houston, number 2 seed, number 5 NCAA net rated team on the season, sit at 28-6 on the year. This game's going to be Thursday. Tip off right now is at 7:10 Pacific. Look, there's essentially no bad losses on Houston's resume. They've got 2 losses to number 2 Arizona, a loss to number 6 Iowa State, a loss to number 17 Kansas, number 20 Texas Tech, and number 23 Tennessee. What you're hearing in that run of games is obviously those are all high major teams. Kelvin Sampson also in his time at Houston has become relatively famous or infamous, depending on who you are, of his teams don't really lose to lower tier type of teams. Kelvin Sampson, look, he worked his way up from, I think he was an NAIA coach at some point in his career. He worked his way up from low level coaching to get to where he is. In addition to a hiatus he had to take from college coaching due to like recruitment type violations, which is my just very long-winded way of saying Kelvin Sampson is a great coach and he is absolutely going to take no team lightly. Because if you make it to the NCAA tournament, obviously something went well for you during that season. So who are the Houston Cougars? One, they play real tough defense. They've held opponents to the fewest field goals made on the season, second fewest like total points allowed. Houston's just absolutely they're absolutely tough, and they've got 3 different players who are scoring in double figures, including Emmanuel Sharp, who is also first team All Big 12. He was first team All Big 12 and All Defense Big 12, and then Kingston Flemings was another first team All Big 12 talent as a freshman. And then we have, honorable mention Big 12 players, Joseph Tugler and Milos Uzon. But to start with, and then Madison, I'm guessing you've probably done a little bit of research about the Houston Cougars, for your
speed catch up here.
Yeah, before we get to the Idaho end, we got to talk about who we're playing. Houston has been pretty solid in the NCAA tournament in Kelvin Sampson's run. No titles, but also no early exits. This is a very good, very tough basketball team. But Madison, I guess, since you're covering Idaho, also glad that the Spokesman Review sent someone down to cover Idaho. So I'll give the Spokesman Review a pat on the back for that. I guess what are your thoughts on the matchup with Houston?
Very quick jump in here from the Tubbs stats team. Kelvin Sampson, Brian, was the head coach and athletic director at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana.
Yeah. The minors, right? Yeah. So first off, I love that I'm down here. Glad the spokesman was able to send someone down. 36 years, that's well worth it for having someone to come down here and cover this team. But also give you guys the flowers because honestly, I love Idaho football. You guys know that I watch every football show. Basketball I've been a little disconnected with, to be fully honest. And so it's been playing a little bit of catch up in recent years. Recent weeks. You guys have been a huge help with that because I've been listening to past shows and really trying to get back into the weeds here of Idaho basketball. Watching the tournament helped, and I watched a few games throughout the year, but I've been able to dig in a lot more. So pat yourselves on the back because it's been nice that you guys have that outlet for me to learn a little bit more here on this team. But yeah, man, Houston, they're Sean pointed out in the comments they're slow. Right? They're slow. They play this tempo that is just kind of drag it out. If you're a Gonzaga fan, and I know obviously coming from Spokane, that's kind of the main focus that we have. It's almost like St. Mary's, right? It's just slow and sluggish, and they're going to make shots. They're not going to let you get a lot of shots. And And that's a little contradictory to Idaho, who likes to shoot 33s a game and try and get some defensive rebounds and push the ball a touch. Houston doesn't do that. They don't turn the ball over very much. They play great defense, top 10 in the country in defense. So it's one of those games where we talked on the women's side, perfect game, right? You got to play a perfect game. Well, in a 15-2, you really have to play a perfect game. But same thing with the women. The guys didn't fly down here to Oklahoma City today just to give up. Right? They're going to play the game. And so come 9, 10 p.m., whatever that is, Oklahoma City Central Time, or God forbid, 10, 15 by the time the thing actually starts, they're going to get on the court and put 5-on-5. And so it's about matching up the best you can. The best part, Houston doesn't have like that dude, right? They don't have the guy that's going to score 30 points a game. They don't have that first team All-American clear-cut top 5 lottery pick kind of guy. They have a couple really, really good players, a lot of good players. And the stats, we look at them, Idaho, I mentioned in my story, I think yesterday, Idaho actually shoots at a better clip. They shoot 3 at a better clip. They rebound actually better than Houston. The difference is that Idaho does it in the Big Sky. Houston does it in the Big 12.
Minor thing too on that on the rebounding thing. Just want to bring this up for context. Teams that identify as defense focused, it's actually not shocking for them to sometimes have lower rebounding margins than you'd expect because they are purposely not crashing the boards with everyone. They're having guys go back on defense so that you can't. The transition opportunities are not there. But just throw it back to you real quick. What you're saying, 100% correct. Even if you think Idaho is like a solid rebounding team, they're at close to the same level, but it's a world apart. Men's Big 12 versus where Idaho's at.
Yeah. I mean, in that rebounding set, it's not like Idaho was out rebounding Houston by 10 a game, right? It was like 1.5. So it's negligible at best. But where they get them is in assists, in steals, in turnovers. Idaho turns over the ball 3 times more a game than Houston does in the Big Sky compared to Big 12. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we're saying X versus Y here. It's a P4 conference powerhouse versus a low-ish level mid-major. But since, the COVID year and the tournament got canceled, there's been 3 15-12 upsets. So this has happened. And honestly, the fun thing if Idaho gets it done is when a 15-2, when the 15 upsets the 2, they win a couple games out of this thing. And so there's some history to get it done, but it doesn't happen as often. But that's why we're going to play the game here in 2 nights.
Yeah. So for me, what I'm looking at now, and again, we don't need to talk about the many ways the Houston Cougars will be expected to win this game. We run this game 100 times. There are a lot of different ways Houston could beat Idaho. Some close, some blowout. That's not what we care about. So what keys to the game for Idaho? If they're going to win this or keep it close so that maybe the March jitters just push Idaho over the edge, which again, just to reference, Houston has not been a team in recent history under Kelvin Sampson where they're letting those lower seed teams hang out. But hey, let's say it happens first time, right? What's going to happen for Idaho? One, we're going to have to hope this Houston team that is not electric offensively. That is not to say this is not Dick Bennett's team, but and this is not Virginia, Tony Bennett, where you want to shoot yourself watching them. But this Houston team that does not have a single guy who, takes over games. We need to hope that they have an off night, that they're just not making shots. We have now, if you watch tournament basketball, you have absolutely seen when better seeded teams start off slow. Idaho's going to need to have that. Going to definitely need to have that happen. And the Vandals, conversely, Idaho cannot afford to start out slow whatsoever against Houston. I don't think Idaho can really afford to get down more than single digits for a few minutes of this game. The Vandals are going to have to start hot and ride that out as much as they can. 2, we need Idaho to not do the passive thing where they're not getting the ball inside the arc on possessions. But there's no way Idaho keeps this game close if they don't have one of their better 3-point shooting games. There is no way Alex Pribble has not brought this up to his team, which I'm going to understand that to mean if a dude's open for 3, they got to take it. That's just how this matchup is going to be. Now, again, as we've said on this show, that doesn't mean like you stop trying to put pressure on the defense and get some foul calls. Now, third thing I want to bring up, this is something we can't do much about. March games tend to be reffed less tightly than, let's say, your average regular Big Sky Conference game. I think Idaho's going to have to hope we have one of the officials who's game to blow the whistle a little more quickly, so they get not different than the Oklahoma matchup on the women's side. If Idaho's going to be beat, like you at least want the bench player, a few bench players on Houston to have to be key for this to happen. How does that happen for Idaho? Other than getting lucky and someone gets hurt, you get guys in foul trouble. Idaho can help make that happen by getting the ball inside the 3-point line, in particular Jackson Rasmussen. If he can get some mismatches, he's got to put the ball on the floor fast. Against a team like Houston, he can't massage that for a second and see the lay of land. He's got to put his head down and go. And I guess lastly, similar to the women's team, Idaho is at times had trouble getting multiple scoring guards to show up. Whereas like in the title game against Montana, Biko Johnson was not really doing a ton, and Colton Mitchell did not have a better game. It was Isaiah Brickner who carried the day from the wing. All 3 of those guys have to show up. All 3 of those guys have to put pressure on Houston defensively, because no matter how good you feel about Brody Roberry, no matter how good you feel about Jackson Rasmussen, which I do feel good about him, Idaho's not going to be able to outpower basketball Houston. Just not going to happen. A lot of the time when a low major team is able to win against a higher major team, it's one of a couple things. One, it's a very good defensive showing from the low major team while the other team is also missing and being sloppy. And that's how it keeps it close. Idaho's just not that great defensively. I don't think that's in it for this Idaho team. So what's the other incarnation is from the wing, because you're not going to be able to to beat Houston with athleticism. You're not going to be able to beat them with size. They're going to have to, the guards are going to have to make something happen. We're going to need the game of the season from Biko, Colton, and Brickner together. And that still may just be enough to keep it close.
Yeah. And the hard part is everything you just said has a double-edged sword to it, right? Because it's a 15-2 matchup. So we want fouls called tighter, right? We want a couple fouls on Houston. Look at the Big Sky Tournament. Idaho got in foul trouble, right? So we don't want fouls called because we kind of, Brody Roberry for 2.5 or a game and a half there, he was in foul trouble. He was non-existent. And so we don't always want fouls called tight, but we do in this game. And then we want them to shoot threes, right? We got to make threes, but we also want to get inside. In the Big Sky Tournament, the threes weren't falling. The rest of the year, they're shooting 30 game and hitting at a really high percentage. So it's going to have to be a mix of all that. And then even, again, looking at the last couple of games, you look at the balance of this team. 4 different leading scorers throughout the 4 games in Boise. And you need, all of them. You need Biko, which, by the way, again, I fully admit, digging in more to this team, his, do we call it Twitter X account, is Biko de Gallo, which is the funniest thing I've ever seen. I lost it when I saw that. He, for the couple games that I saw, non-existent, right? I'm like, you can tell he's exciting, but there wasn't anything there. Rasmussen in that title game just kind of went blank, but luckily you watch it and you're like, Isaiah Brickner is a dude. Like he's got it. And so, and Brody, is a ready-made, I wrote about it in today's paper, is a ready-made March cult hero, right? With the flopped up hair and the bald spot and the flat shot. Like the dude is ready-made to be that guy that CBS focuses on in the one shining moment as the guy that hit big shots. So everything that we think needs to go right, there's also a second side to that could go really wrong for Idaho. And that's why they're a 15 seed. But they got guys and they play together and they play for each other, which is really fun. And talking, with Pribble down there on Sunday in the ICCU arena, which anyone who was down there, by the way, awesome atmosphere. That was my first time in the arena. I haven't had a chance to go down there since it was built. So what a cool place. a couple hundred fans in there. They were loud. Patchen had everyone pumped up. The interviews in between the segments were great. The anticipation sucked. Waiting in there. Were either of you guys down there? I didn't think you guys were.
No,
Right
I couldn't
now.
make it.
Unfortunately,
Really
no.
wanted to, just couldn't.
Yeah. The audible, like, breath holding every 16 seed, 15 seed, 14 seed that was announced, and then just the after. And then when the biggest one by far was the 14-3 when Gonzaga got announced in Portland. And then it was this, and then just a, and then the biggest sigh of relief was when it got to the South region and those 16 seeds where it was a play-in game got announced, and it wasn't them. And it was this, thank God, right? We don't want to go to Dayton and play, I think it was tonight, UMBC and Howard. I think Howard won. I don't know, or it's tomorrow.
Correct.
Yeah. They didn't want to play that. And frankly, they don't want to go to that. Fans can't go to that. And then from there, you're going to Buffalo or Tampa or wherever the heck it was. And so just this team wants to do well for each other. They want to do well for Coach Pribble. Like, it's this 3-year unbelievable rebuild, which you guys have covered ad nauseum, but it's such a stark difference from what we've seen for a long time out of Idaho basketball. We all remember that I think it was 2014 team that made the title game. We're looking at like Steven Madison and Landon Tatum and, Jim Bandemill and those guys who were just, Kyle Barone. And that was for us before this, that was Idaho basketball at its tippy top, and it still wasn't good enough, right? Because we fell to New Mexico State or Nevada or whoever the heck it was. And so seeing this iteration, and as I wrote about today in the paper, I'm plugging this all because I want you guys to go read it because they sent me down here, so might as well, read the paper. It's done by 5 Idaho guys. 4 Titus is out for the year, but 4 Idaho guys, the most since that 71-72 season, which is wild to me, are making such a difference in this program, and it follows the trend of what every other team in this program is doing and the school is doing, of getting the best guys locally to do well, perform, play for the community, play for the school, and win. And so it's cool, and it's a great story, and that's awesome. You still got to go play Houston.
Yeah, built not bought is how Pribble's been talking about this team, which I like that a ton.
Yeah,
and I guess I view this for the men's team differently than for the women's team. Look, again, both of them already won their Super Bowl, making it to the NCAA tournament, right? For the women's, on the women's side, that's a program that is in about as good shape as you can be in the Big Sky. I mean, obviously, like Coach Morera has been just kicking ass there, but even though there's a 10-year gap on the women's side, the 10 years was exclusively still pretty competitive, good to okay teams in those 10 years. Yeah. There's just a gap in making the NCAA tournament. And on the women's side too, it's been since 94, no Big Sky women's team has won since then. So that just is what it is, right? On the men's side, this is an Idaho team that did not win more than 2 games in a row until the conference tournament. This is a team that before the conference tournament, if you took the temperature of the fans on, let's say, from our Discord, patreon.com/Tubs and Clubs to support the show, guys. Best place to talk Vandal sports online, not even close. But if you took the temperature of that crew, like the people who are really paying attention to Idaho basketball before the NCAA tournament, the feelings were kind of ambivalent towards the end, just because this was a team that felt like they were leaving wins on the table throughout the regular season. Objectively better than any team in 8 years, right? First winning season since 2018. So everyone knows that's a step up. But this run of 4 games to the Big Sky Conference tournament, I think that actually means more for Idaho as far as being able to potentially take the next step, with the follow-up being, even if Idaho doesn't win, if they can be competitive against Houston, if they can make Houston sweat, that to me feels like it could be the kind of step that could really help Idaho launch further into, launch Idaho into the type of team where if they win the conference tournament again in Boise next year, people aren't calling it a Cinderella run. Because that's our next hope. This was not a Cinderella run for the women's team. Everyone knows that. This was a team that was minus one game in Bozeman, beat the shit out of the Big Sky the entire season. That was not the case for the men's team. So I guess my other hope here is obviously we all want to win, but everyone can tell its own. We're like, you gotta be realistic, right? The record of 15-2 in the NCAA tournament, you would be a moron to gamble on any 15-2 matchup just because it's 15-2 for a reason. But if Idaho can be respectable, if Idaho can make recruits think, oh, I can do something at Idaho, I really think that could be a big deal, and also waking up the region to Idaho basketball. I've said this to people on the phone thousands of times. Idaho basketball has spent a lot of time telling people to not pay attention. The last week in March in my lifetime feels like the first big shift of like, no, guys, there actually could be a reason that we need the region to start paying attention and get increasingly better, attendance at Idaho basketball, have more recruits regionally think, no, I want to go to Idaho because I can do what I want to at Idaho. And doing something in this game doesn't have to be a win. I do think that matters materially for this program.
Well, I'll admit I'm guilty of that too, right? I mentioned that at the start of the show. Right? Like, Idaho basketball, to me, the women's basketball team meant a lot because I covered that team when I was there. But the men's basketball team, I just have been able to passively not pay attention to for a long time now. And then come the Big Sky tournament, they win that first game against Sac State. And I'm like, all right, well, that's awesome because those guys. And then you beat Montana State, which is awesome because those guys, And then, I got family connections to Eastern. So, yeah, stick it to them. And then I got family connections to Montana, so really stick it to them. And I'm like, all right, I'm a full-fledged. And even my wife, we're laying in bed, and she's like, all right, don't cheer too loud. I'm going to bed. And I'm like, I'm going to try not to, but, like, I want to get kind of pumped about this. And normally she understands with football, like, she lets me go on my own because I'm insane with Idaho football. I take the media hat off with football and don't ask me to cover a game. It's not going to happen. But for basketball, I'm able to, put the neutral, hat on as need be and cover it as it needs to be done. Because it just doesn't have, like you said, that I don't know, aura around it that maybe some of the other sports have, and especially women's basketball has had. But it's getting there. And so that's going to be the tough thing now for Pribble and the staff moving forward. And it's the same thing that Ford has had in football and every sport's had. Can you keep the guys that are good? Can you get more of the guys in that want to be here? Specifically, the best guys from the state of Idaho. We don't want them to go into Boise. Don't want them going to Pocatello. Get the best players from Idaho into Moscow. This run will do a lot to that. And then the other thing is next year they're going to have to prove something that teams haven't been able to prove, which is win consistently the Big Sky tournament. Because it's just been a rotating door down at Boise the last couple of years.
Well, I mean, this was the first season. I guess the other kind of step I'm hoping this can help Idaho take is, so hey, like remember Jason Eckheim in football year one when Idaho's a fun story. Most people in the Big Sky greeted that as like, okay, well, good news, whatever. Like Idaho's finally relevant. Yeah. As by X third season, I felt like some of that sentiment was starting to change because the team had established, no, like we're here. We're not a good story. Like we might actually kick your ass. Yeah. The version of that for basketball. But by the way, but both teams, but men in particular, just because of the reality that men's athletics tends to get better attendance than women's, is I have not heard enough people bitching about the fact that Boise is de facto home court for Idaho. This is the very first time I had ever seen any media even take the time to point it out. Skyline did it prior to the championship game. Posting some clips of the obvious Idaho fan superiority in that game against Montana. Idaho's got to be good enough that people start bitching about the Big Sky tournament being in Boise, guys. And I do think this is the type of moment for Idaho where you don't have to win.
Let's go to Vegas. Let's take it to Vegas.
That's not changing until at least 2031. And I understand people want to go to Vegas. I don't want that. Like I want this here. This is like the best place it could possibly be for Idaho basketball.
I mean, it was pretty fun covering the tournaments in Vegas, Brian.
It was pretty fun in Vegas. Yeah, it was pretty fun in Vegas.
Okay, well, I accept if you are paid.
You can have Boise, it's fine. Yeah, you can have Boise, it's fine.
Yeah. No, dude, I am not going to argue Vegas over Boise as a normal vacation destination, but very narrowly for the place I want my basketball team to win their conference tournament. Yeah, I'll take Boise 1,000 times out of 1,000 in that matchup, but I just got to get to the point that people are actually even upset about that. Like, this is the first time I've heard anyone who's not me acknowledge it. And when I previously bring it up on the show, it was bitching that Idaho's not taking advantage of it. They finally did this year. But, Madison, you brought up a point that matters on the men's side in particular is can this turn into something else? Now, that's for an episode in the future for us to discuss, of course. But relative to this week, what can Idaho do to help that actually happen in the future? You show up and at least make Houston sweat.
Yep. Put on a show. Play your brand of basketball. And I got an interesting an answer when I asked Coach Prebble about this. I said, do you have to hardline focus on, guys, we got to play our game, or do we need a full sellout to play what we think can beat Houston? And he said, you can't do that. But you also can't just go in and say, guys, we're doing and hope it happens, right? There's so much, and that's why he's paid what he's paid and he has the assistants that he has. There's a blending of it that they have to go in and play a smart game. It's going to be slow. And Idaho, I think if they try to speed it up, it's going to be a problem. They got to hit shots in that slow court. They have to defend. They have to rebound really well. The biggest thing is they have to stay out of foul trouble, right? The depth isn't there. If they get into foul trouble, it's going to be a rough one pretty quick, especially if Jackson gets in there, if Brody gets in there, Colton gets a couple of reach-in fouls. You're getting pretty deep in a not as deep bench as a team like Houston has. And I think the other biggest thing, Kelvin Sampson, say what you want about his history with, the NCAA or this or that, or the guy is a smart coach and he knows what he's doing. And you look, he was able to beat Gonzaga last year at Houston, and Gonzaga was probably severely underrated in that situation and put up a big fight against Houston. They were able to kind of calm the storm and get that win. He knows what he's doing. He's not just going to think. When I talk to him tomorrow at 3:00 over in the arena, he's not going to be talking about St. Mary's or A&M, right? He's going to be talking about Idaho, and he understands that has to be the focus. And he's going to have his guys pretty locked in on doing the right things. So Idaho's just going to have to be smart and make shots and get a little lucky. But that's March, right? We have these stories because they've happened.
The only I guess benefit I'd say of the matchup, which I think it's a tough matchup, is when teams are slow, if they're not able to knock that lower seed out, that's when you can get that last 5 minutes and maybe something weird happens. You think about, this isn't the same thing, but you think about University of Virginia being the first 1 seed to ever lose to a 16 seed. This is the downside of not playing fast basketball and knocking teams out, is if the low major team can hang around for a little bit and start to believe things can happen, that when you see those close games, the psychology of it is you're simultaneously seeing the better seeded team they're also starting to doubt, or they're starting to play a little bit tight. So Idaho, as you brought up, they're going to have to probably play the best defense of their lives, and Houston's going to have to miss some shots. However, the slower paced team, that does set this up to stay a little bit tighter, so long as Idaho is still able to put some points on the board and not make the kind of mistakes that can let a Houston team get up by 12-ish, which for Idaho, down 12, that's essentially like being down 20.
Well, and you also need Houston to do the freshman flame out. This is a team led with a freshman point guard. Kingston Flemings is probably going to be a top 5 pick, certainly a top 10 pick in the NBA draft this go around. But there's so many stories of touted freshmen making runs in the tournament and doing these. Derrick Rose went on an incredible run, 20 years ago almost at this point. there's also plenty of stories of guys not rising to that occasion. And I think if you're Idaho, that's also something you're going to have to figure out. You have got to get Fleming's uncomfortable. It's probably not going to happen. And again, you play this game 100 times and we could guess how at least 96 of them are probably going to go. But to me, you look at this team and the way they're constructed and the way that Fleming's plays, and they don't turn the ball over at all. They're number one in the nation in turnovers. If you can force him to make a couple mistakes early on, again, maybe that the moment does get to the freshman, but you really gotta get that plus 4 or 5 other things to break your way to make this work.
Yeah, that's the 2 ways of winning this game. The way you talked about, Dallas, that's the St. Peter's versus Kentucky way, right? Because that Kentucky team just had freshmen. It was just freshman after freshman, and they got overwhelmed by this senior-laden St. Peter's team that ended up making this run. And it was a little higher scoring, but it's because Kentucky just made mistakes and took the foot off the gas. And I don't see that happening with this Houston team because they're so smart. More likely is going to be looking back at what Princeton did to Arizona a couple years ago, because Princeton slowed that thing. That game was in the 50s, and Arizona missed shots, and so that's a more likely scenario of what we might be looking at if Idaho was able to pull this thing is winning this thing in the 50s. Not that I would condone gambling, but the under is already, the over under on this thing is crazy low. It's one of the lowest of the entire first round. It might even go under that. It's not a big number that I think is going to get put up unless Houston just gets hot and they get hot. And at that point, tip the cap, so be it. But I think more likely you're looking at that Princeton Arizona game than you are that Kentucky St. Peter's or Oral Roberts Ohio State. Same thing, a lot of freshmen, and then you get Max Abrams just comes out on fire and leads Oral Roberts to that Sweet 16 run. But that's 3 teams I've mentioned since COVID that have been able to kind of get that win and make that run in different ways, which is kind of fun. So yeah, Tom, I like our chances. Sure. We'll go with that. That's, a fun way. One of 2 teams has to win. They can't tie. So there's at least a chance there.
The official number 11 and 145.
Yeah.
For the 2:15 game. So Idaho looking to be number 12.
Someone's got to do it eventually, right? No, but that's part of why, the way I am looking at this game is Idaho already, again, I've said this as the metaphor a few times, but Idaho won their Super Bowl already, guys. Anything else is just the best season in program history with a team. I think we can all say this is not the best Idaho men's team in the history of the program, but a NCAA tournament win would be best thing this program's ever seen. The Big Sky has not won a tournament game on the men's side in 20 years. So just understand that as the backdrop, enjoy the game, enjoy finally being relevant for the NCAA tournament. And then whatever happens on Thursday is going to happen. Regardless, this season has finished for Idaho men as well as it possible. There's no way for it to have ended better than it has this season so already. So there's a lot going well for Idaho to close the season out. It doesn't matter how the tournament goes. For the people who are able to buy tickets and get there, awesome, great for everyone who can do that. I can't go to the game, so I have to watch. So Madison, you'll be able to tell us how the environment is at some point.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about tickets. I'm worried about flights. My flight alone to get down here was a little, luckily the company covered that, but that's, just to give you guys some coverage. But Oklahoma City's a weird one, right? Who comes here? It's an odd spot to get to. And luckily it was I thought I was going to be on a plane for 12 hours. I was on a plane for 5 hours, which was kind of nice this morning. But yeah, it was expensive to get down here and stay here. But yeah, I'm excited to see who comes down, especially with having both teams, right? I think that's an added benefit for a fan. If you're able to come down, you kind of get a double dip in a single trip, as I like to say. And so you get kind of that benefit of having both teams. My Super Bowl out of this, O'Brien, is if it continues. Okay, they won the game. That's cool. I really want to see it continue into next year and the year after, and make this team as relevant as it was in the early '80s, in the late '80s to early '90s. Really, that 10-year stretch, 4 tournaments in 10 years. Obviously, Coach Monson kind of started that off, and that's going to be a big part of my storyline tomorrow. I'm going to talk to Coach Sampson about that, because obviously he had some memories, because obviously after Don left Idaho, he went to Oregon, so they would have played each other quite a bit, and kind of get his thoughts on that. So there's a lot going on there, but Idaho's heyday was so fun, and there were some crazy coaches that came through here. Can this be the start of football too? I mean, every sport, we talk about how many sports had crazy coaching lineages. I want to see if this can continue and not just be a bit of a one-year wonder, because I think if Coach Pribble stays and does it right, he really can build it up. Because he has some excitement in this program, some excitement in the state, where you see Montana and Montana State, their in-state numbers are dropping off. They didn't have as many Montana kids on their rosters as they have in the past. Idaho's getting more. And so if they can continue getting the Coeur d'Alene kids and the Meridian and Boise kids and the Pocatello kids. Speaking of Pocatello kids, Houston has one on their roster. When we look at, what is it, Isaiah Harwell is from Pocatello. Went to school in Utah, to prep school, but he's a Pocatello kid, right? And so get these kids out of Idaho, and that's the Super Bowl for me. If they win this, great. And that gives me, 2 more days in Oklahoma. But if they win this, or if they lose it, continue this trend and build it up to be a 13 seed next year, or maybe even into that higher seed discussion. And that's when we're starting to have some fun with Idaho men's basketball.
And I guess last point, because we're a little over an hour at this point right now, is, I guess, further buttress what Madison is saying. The Big Sky, for better or worse, in some ways worse because we're not getting the money from the NCAA tournament units. But if no team has won an NCAA tournament game in 20 years out of the Big Sky, you guys can put that together, and we have lived this. There is no dominant program that is prohibiting Idaho from taking a theoretical step. You have Montana State. They have remained solid, of course, but for Montana, you have some coaching changes, and again, like Matt Logie's done a great job there. But I don't think anyone started this Big Sky season thinking like, well, of course Montana State's going to dominate, right? Montana is going to be solid, but for a while they've just kind of their time with Travis DeCure, they're in this weird loveless marriage where they're going to be solid, but like their attendance numbers are dwindling. They haven't won the conference for the regular season conference for a minute.
Wayne Tinkle's back on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Well, and by the way, that was the last coach. Wait, no, I think it was Larry Kristowiak. It was Larry Kristowiak, the last coach when Montana won. But Wayne Tinkle took them to the NCAA tournament during his time. But there isn't a single program in this region at this level that is making it impossible for Idaho to take that potential step. The build has been slow, let's say, because again, I mean, if you had asked me mid-February, would I have said the build is even a build yet? I would have said the jury is not in yet. But it does feel like there's some things breaking Idaho's way basketball wise, and we'll find out the long-term ramifications later on. But what can Idaho do to help us out with that? Show up on Thursday.
Yeah, and watch the game, and then last shout out I'll give is for this little bit of time. I know it's been I watch the podcast with you guys, and I love them, and I read the comments, and obviously the spokesman can be hit and miss sometimes with Idaho coverage. We understand that because it's a weird regionality thing for us. It's in Moscow, it's not in Spokane. Lewiston's there. It's tough. We're caring about this, right? Like we send someone down to Oklahoma City, and we're full court pressing this best we can. So feel free to hop on, read my coverage, and even though I don't like to say the Gonzaga word around here, and I know Dallas especially hates it. The spokesman's coverage is led by a Gonzaga alum and Theo Lawson, someone that we all know really well.
Idaho alum and Theo Lawson.
Sorry, Idaho alum. It's
Fighting
10
words,
p.m.
dude.
I know. Idaho. He's gonna kill me. He's my best friend. It's led by an Idaho alum and someone who does a really good job and learned a lot at the University of Idaho, as you guys know, and we were all kind of there together. So feel free to give some love, and I'm excited to give coverage on this and watch it. And hey, if we win, I'm excited to hop back on here on Friday night and talk more about it and go from there. But it's a cool story that I think the cooler story is if it leads to continued growth in this program, which genuinely I think it might. Like I kind of got a vibe from this team and the fans and Coach Fribble and everything that this is going in the right direction. And the things he said, again, we've seen it with like Wazoo football, right? You can say the right things and then see ya, I'm out of here to Wake Forest or wherever. But he genuinely seems like a guy who wants to wear Idaho on his chest. He talked about the collective of all the coaches wanting to build this thing together, and they have to be in lockstep and build it and build it and build it. And I'm like, okay, I kind of dig what you're saying and hope it's true. And so that's going to be the big thing moving forward. And if tomorrow's result, no matter what, is the cherry on top of it, it's a cool experience for this team to be back in the dance for the first time in over 3.5 decades. And again, the first time they've been in it since Coach Monson died back in October, I think it was. So a neat way to cap a year that had a lot of storylines for Idaho.
Yeah, and again, for anybody that is still on the fence about heading out to Oklahoma, the distance between the venues the men and women are playing in is 24 miles, essentially a straight shot on the interstate. So if you want to see the Vandals in the tournament, man, this is the best chance you're ever going to see both teams at the same time. And
luckily, the distance between my Courtyard Marriott and the Paycom Center is about 100 feet. So I don't think the NCAA, I don't like to give them a lot of credit most of the time, but man, they hit it out of the park on this one. I'm not good at throwing a baseball, but easily can hit it. I'm in the parking lot of the thing. So if you're staying here, congratulations. It's a short stroll or roll, depending on how many beverages you have by 9-10 p.m. on Thursday night.
Yeah, late tip. I hope we do have a couple Vandals rolling into the Paycom Center. That would be quite lovely to see.
It's where we're at our best, right? Those late nights or worst, I guess, sometimes depending on how. Yeah, we talked about double-edged swords, right? It's a double-edged sword.
There we go. Way to bring us home, Madison. Way to bring us home.
Yeah.
Guys, again, thank you to the Spokesman Review and Madison McCord for jumping on the pod today. Madison, obviously we've gone back a long time. I've known you for 15 years at this point. So, proud Jam School grads over
there.
Yeah,
no, great. It was great. I felt like I was just chatting with you guys. So it was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to catch up. So
thanks again. We will hopefully catch up with you very soon. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, before we adjourn?
Easy. I'm just ready for the damn thing, man.
Yeah, have fun. Let's watch some basketball, right?
Love it. Patreon.com/Tubs of the Club to support the show. Vandal Men Thursday, 7:10 Pacific time. Vandal Women Friday, 7 o'clock Pacific time. V's up. And as always, go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
Night, guys.
Play this.